Okay, we're back and we're live. Sorry about that, folks. Had a brief internet hiccup. And James, oh, there's John. Okay, Jonathan's okay, cool. James and Heather just waited. You can hear me. You're on they're not in yet, but well, anyway, welcome everyone to episode 7 of reConnected. I'm your host, Sean McLeod, and the point of reConnected is to reconnect with God and hopefully with each other. I hope everyone's doing well. Hopefully we'll get some viewers tonight. I know some friends will be watching, and if not, hopefully we'll have a good conversation. Tonight's topic is resting, and what does that look like from the Christian perspective. Now, we have we have one new panelist tonight, which will be nice. And I just want to say at the outset, and everyone should be able to hear me. You guys can hear me, right? Yeah, I assume. Okay, right. So it may be that something we talked about tonight is something where maybe we don't always agree on something. And so the ground rules are, let's listen in Christian love. Let's listen to understand, not to respond. And keep everything civil and have a good conversation. This is probably not a super controversial topic, but with COVID and everything, you never know how that goes. So let's bring in our guests. Let's see that we got 1, 2, and 3. All right. We have to my left, your right. He's been on the show. I think you're in the lead for most appearances. Let me turn everybody's names on here, too. Still learning how to use this. There we go. James Lance, how you doing tonight, sir?
Good. How are you?
Handsome. And then to below James is, of course, the ever lovely. And spoiler alert, we're wearing matching hoodies. You just can't see it because she's washed out there. The lovely, as always, Pastor Heather McLeod. How you doing tonight, dear?
Doing okay.
And then now, below my camera, you do not see his face. You see his avatar, which you may notice is the Starfleet logo with a Methodist cross and flame. Please welcome for the first time on reConnected, Pastor Jonathan Williams. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you much.
That's it. All right. Welcome to... So we'll just go around and give some brief introductions in case we have new viewers to the program. I'm Sean McLeod. I'm also, spoiler alert, we're all Methodist pastors. If you haven't figured that out by now, we're
look
all
at my
preachers.
icon.
Yes, well, look at Jonathan's icon. We're all just that crazy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I pastor church in Ohio, and I started this podcast to try to help people try to give some Christian responses to some of the things in our world. And we'll tell you what, we'll save the new guy to last. James, why don't you introduce yourself and anything you want everybody out there to know?
My name is James Lance. I'm currently finishing up with seminary. I am also serving 3 churches in Ohio right now. And I was invited on by Sean and just keep showing back up.
And I'm Heather. I'm married to Sean. I don't know if you should congratulate me or take pity on me or a combination thereof, but there we are. It is what it is. And I'm also pastoring a church in Ohio. I believe we're all in Ohio, but anyway.
Yes. I'm Jonathan Williams. I'm also the pastor of a Methodist church in Ohio. I met Sean in seminary. And then he was the best man at my wedding, and then he met Heather, and I was the best man at his. So we go back a bit.
There is some history. We'll get into that later. That's a different topic for.
I'm not the third wheel in that relationship at all. No.
We don't have wheels.
Oh boy. Okay.
Sorry.
All right. This is how. Okay.
Sean,
this has been a good night, guys.
I did. It's my fault. I knew what I was getting into. But this is what makes the show entertaining, right? So tonight, what I thought we would talk about, given, we're all in Ohio, and I'm sure, and the reason I sort of gave the preamble I did before is I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreement in principle about things, but there may be we didn't hear a topic that we have a disagreement on, that's fine. Let's be okay with that. But this idea of rest, especially in light of what's been going on, particularly with COVID, particularly in our state, we hear the phrase COVID fatigue. That's a real thing, and we'll touch on that. But why don't we'll start with something kind of basic. How do you understand? I titled this, rest parentheses in God, right? And we're going to look at some scripture actually too. We're going to look at two different scriptures. We're going to look at one from the Old Testament, one from the New. You get one guess which one is the one from the New. That's your hint. And then one that we don't sort of think about, because it's an interesting one in terms of rest, from one of the prophets. I'll let you guess where we're going with that. But when you think of rest, what's the first thing you think of? And we'll just go around the horn. Jonathan, we'll start with you. We'll go around the other way this time.
Well, you didn't tell me what the scriptures are you're going to use, so I got to be careful I don't steal your thunder in this one. Honestly,
the Old Testament's from Isaiah.
Okay, good. I'll go with somebody else. I will actually go with Elijah, because Elijah has this wonderful moment, and the side effect of the reflections I've been doing with my congregation for Lent included this notion of rest at one point. And in Elijah's story, you have a moment when he picked a fight with a queen, and she said, "I'm going to kill you," and so he ran for his life and fled out into the wilderness. And then there's this wonderful moment when basically what he's saying is, I can't do this. And God says, you know what? You need a nap, and then you need to eat something. You just got to stop and take care of yourself. And once you've done that, you'll have the energy you need to go on. And he did, and he was able to keep going from there. But we have this tendency, and it's so common in the world, but it hits everybody, where we assume that the ideal default is to push through and keep going. And there are moments where what we really need to do is give ourselves that permission and just say, no, stop, rest, eat something, set it all down, walk away, take care of yourself, and then come back to it when you're better. And we don't do that very often. And COVID has given us this shining example from people who work in healthcare, where they have not had the capacity to do this the way that we normally want to, because they're just constantly inundated with, you have to keep going, you have to keep going. People's lives depend on it, and they burn out. And it's all kinds of people across society where we're just having this sense of we are so exhausted because we haven't been able to figure out how we prioritize this art of stop, set it down, rest, take care of yourself.
Yeah, very, very good. Pastor Heather, what do you think of when you think of rest?
Well, just say to kind of continue on with what Jonathan was saying. I think of when you're on an airplane and the flight attendant's giving you the instructions on emergency procedures. They always say, if oxygen levels drop, masks will fall down from the ceiling, and make sure you put the mask on yourself before you try to help anyone else. And they've had to specify that because, it's an instinct of a mother or another caretaker, or fathers too, to want to help their child who is struggling first before they put their own mask on. And what they're finding is that the adult passes out, and then both parent and child are in trouble. And it applies to all areas of life, and it applies to ministry that we are all in right now, because this is uncharted territory. Forget about things they don't teach you in seminary. I don't think they teach you this in any profession, in any life, because the last time the world experienced something like this, it was 100 years ago. And when you are in a caring profession, and pastors I would lump in with that, because I doubt we would be doing this if we didn't, to some extent, care for people. We want to be there all the time. We want to be there for our congregation. We want to be there for our community, and we can't. And so there's emotional exhaustion as well as physical exhaustion. We can't go and sit at the bedside of Mrs. Smith, who is struggling to stay alive because of COVID. We can't go and sit and pray with Mr. Jones before he goes and gets his surgery. And, that's, for me, the emotional burden of not being able to be there the way I'd like to be has really been hard. And the emotional exhaustion is a slippery slope to depression, to feeling inadequate, to just all kinds of dark places. So yeah, we not just physical rest, it's the emotional rest we need to somehow figure out how to give ourselves.
All right. Thank you. James, you're up.
Yeah, so my first thought is actually of the New Testament scripture we're going to look at, but trying not to steal from anyone or what we're going to go into. One of the other thoughts I had is I truly believe that 99% of people get up and want to be their best and want to do their best at whatever they're called to do. And part of that is you aren't your best if you're tired. You aren't going to be able to do your best if you're tired, if you're exhausted. You're going to be cranky. You're going to be reacting instead of responding. You're going to not be doing well, and you're probably not going to say things that you mean to or other things like that. And so the scripture I think of with that is Jonah 4, which I'm guessing we're somewhat familiar with, where Jonah's angry at the Lord for not burning Nineveh. He sticks up a chair and says, all right, I'm going to wait till you burn Nineveh. He takes a nap from a tree that the Lord has created under the shade. And then he gets really cranky when the tree goes away, so he can't nap anymore because he doesn't have the shade to nap anymore. And so he doesn't get his full 8 hours of rest, and we get Jonah without coffee, and it's not a good scene. And Jonah starts yelling at the Lord. And so I think of, as pastors, we have to remember Jonah had a really long week. He started off sailing away. He probably didn't sleep great on the ship. He definitely didn't sleep great in the belly of the fish. He then got coughed up on dry land where he didn't sleep great. If we are, as a pastor, doing that, or even anyone who's in their call going through a week like that, realize you're going to reach that snapping point, as Jonah did with the Lord. That just is not a good place to be at, and will have responses that you don't want to have.
Jonah without coffee.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sermon in there somewhere. There's a T-shirt in there somewhere. That's a very. If you're just joining the stream, I saw we got a couple of viewers. Welcome. This is reConnected episode 7. We're talking about the importance of rest in different facets. And honey, I appreciated your take on sort of the emotional side of this too. This is both a whole person kind of thing. I'm reminded of something you said to me a long time ago, Jonathan. I don't know do you remember the quote that you gave a while back when I think we were in seminary, about God desiring certain versus certain?
Sorry, that's a little too vague for me. I don't remember the exact. So if you remember,
I know what he's referring to.
Your comment to me specifically was, God desires living sacrifices, not burnt offerings.
Yes.
Yes.
That was not original with me. I don't remember who said it, but that was not original with me.
So we'll give credit to whoever said it, but there's that always sort of stuck with me, especially as someone who deeply believes in Luke 9:23, that if you want to come after Jesus, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And if you've ever studied, we're in the Easter season, right? If you know anything about what happens on Holy Week, Good Friday especially, the way of the Via Dolorosa, that there's not a whole lot of rest there. Although there's rest stops because he falls down, but there's not a whole lot of rest in that. But yet at the same time, you learn that whether it's in ministry or any other aspect of life, just in general. I know we're all pastors. It's one thing for us to say that, but in reality, whether you're a healthcare worker, whether you're a daycare worker, grocery store worker, heck, with everything, this affects everybody. Even if you're somebody who is privileged enough to work from home, even if you're not physically tired, you're certainly feeling the emotional effects. And so, what I kind of want to get at, so if you're willing to, share with the audience what you've been doing, as much as you're willing to share, to sort of help find rest in this season. And the reason I want us to share is I'm sort of hoping that maybe, even if it's something little that we're doing, it might help somebody else who's struggling. So we'll go the other way this time. So James, you're up.
Yeah. So when I first hear rest, I think of as a way to rest is sleep. And that's really important. And we've discussed that a lot. But I think it's also important to note that there are ways that aren't sleep that are also restful and rejuvenating. And so some of the things I've looked at is, if you remember, the Lord has the Sabbath day you do no work, but you're still awake during that day. So when we look at taking a Sabbath, whether you're a pastor or anyone else, that's a time that you are awake. By all means, take a nap if you need it. By all means, sleep in, get your rest. But also, you need to have some conscious hours where you're not actually feeling anxiety driven, where you're not doing work, where you're able to either catch up with friends to have that social part of it, whether you're playing games, sometimes you're minding out on either books or TV, or you're outside for a while, or there's something that isn't anxiety producing to you that you do during your conscious hours as well, that you will find restful as well. And that can be hard to do some days. There are weeks and years and people who have certain parts of their life right now, especially if you have kids or families, it can be really hard to find those hours where you're not feeling anxious over something or like you have to do something. But that is also an important part of rest that you need to work out.
Yep, exactly. Very important. Heather? You falling asleep?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm lost in thought. This is something I do struggle a lot with. It wasn't all that long ago that I was in seminary. Though I'm thinking it might be longer than anyone else on this call, which is odd. Especially James, since you're still there.
I can confirm that is correct. Because you finished seminary what year? 2014?
2014, yes. Yeah.
So you are the senior graduate. Congratulations.
Oh gosh, that's terrifying. Anyway, but the things that like I did when I was in seminary, it was 4 years of full-time classes, serving a church as a children's minister, and having a work-study job on campus where I worked with preschoolers, and on occasion I worked at a Christian bookstore. And I didn't have some of the responsibilities that some of my classmates had. I wasn't married yet. I didn't have kids of my own. Basically, all I did was study, go to class, and work for 4 years straight. And I got addicted to the adrenaline. And it has been hard to get off of that adrenaline that I had to live under for those years. And one positive thing, and don't think of too many things with coming out of this as being positive, but one positive thing that came out of COVID for me is being forced to get off that adrenaline high, and to actually, because I can't be everywhere, because I can't do everything, because I can't schedule every minute of my day like I used to. And it's been forcing me to rest. And I'm still struggling with finding the balance. But I have been taking more time for myself, spending more time with Sean, and allowing myself, forgiving myself for not being there 110% of the time from my congregation. Though that's a little bit harder. You know, the joke is there's no such thing as a part-time church. That's a running joke. You'll hear people like, oh, I'm only quarter time, or I'm 3/4 time. You know, but it's sad that that's a running joke, because, you know, if we allow it, churches can really run our lives, and we need to prioritize family. We need to prioritize our rest. And it's something that I'm slowly, because I am very stubborn, slowly learning.
Well, I am apparently in good company, as there's someone else who admits to being stubborn, so that is good. And I don't know what all audience you have here, so I have to start with the assumption that, you know, the four of us are all active in ministry. We're pastors, but the truth is that the balance we're trying to find is not something that is uniquely tied to ministry. It is a question that everyone faces in their life. How do you find a balance in your life between the work and the family and the fun and the sleep and the everything else? And you could do a spreadsheet really quickly and look at all the things you want to do and all the things that people think you should do and count up how many hours in the week, and you realize that you need about 9.5 days in the week, not counting the time you're asleep. So there's always a give and take. What I did, and this is actually the conversation I've had with my current church and also with the churches I was at for the 4 years previous where I was, and I described to them and I said, in the regular world, when somebody has a full-time job, the way we think of that right now, we assume that there is a weekend, that a person has 2 full days when they are not at work. One of those days is just a general day off. That's what Saturday is for a lot of people in the world. And then we as Christians recognize the need for a Sabbath day, which is a separate kind of day away from work, which is where we worship together. And you know, there's so many other ways of understanding what Sabbath is, but that's kind of what Sunday turns into. I can't take Saturday and Sunday as a weekend, because Saturday is a prep day and Sunday is when church is. But I intentionally say in my normal week, I have a day off and a Sabbath, and they are separate days. And the idea is to sort of balance out the amount of time, so that over the course of a week, there are some occasions where I'm basically not available to the church because that's my time off. And in a crisis, yes, I can be, because there's always that little bit of, you know, you're on call. If you're a parent, you're always on call for your kids. It doesn't matter what you're doing. That's how it goes. If you're a pastor, you're on call for a crisis where someone's in the hospital, because that's how it goes. And this was true even before COVID. But to have that as a focus going in, the notion of saying, I'm trying to balance my time, I've turned it into 2 days. When I started, I looked at it and I said, if I take every day and divide it into 3 blocks of about 4 hours and figure there's 12 hours of space I could work with, okay, so how many blocks out of the week should be focused on work? This is, you know, back when I was starting in ministry and I was single at the time, so I wasn't trying to balance, you know, between my wife's schedule and mine. I didn't have a wife yet. But just that sense of, okay, so in any given day, well, maybe I've got a busy day where I'm using all 3 blocks for church work. But what does it work out to? Well, full time, if you do the math in your head, 40 hours, I think that worked out to about 12 blocks a week. And so with that sense of, if I'm doing something in the morning that's church work, okay, that's that block taken up. So then I have another block available for another time. Everyone in their own life with their own work schedule, especially people who work full-time, possibly from home, possibly with kids that might even be learning online in the next room. It's the art of balancing and figuring out for themselves, how much time am I really giving to this thing? And to be willing to say on a certain point, I don't need to be available 24/7 for work. I need to be able to draw a line and say, at this point, I need to stop working and stop focusing on it and let my life be about something else until the next time I'm scheduled to come back to it.
along those lines,
Go
I
ahead.
had along those lines, I had a seminary professor give us this advice, and I try to live by it, but it's always hard. You take those 3 quadrants of the day that you were talking about there, Jonathan, and you only work 2 of them, or maybe even only 1 of them, depending on what kinds of things are going on in the week. If you have and I try to live by that. If you have a meeting in the evening, like a church council meeting or something like that, then take either the morning or the afternoon off, so you can get that rest. It doesn't always work out, but it's a good intention anyway.
I found that was a good model to follow when I was single. Because, there was a rare day when I'd fill up all 3 blocks with work, but most of the time it was, well, if I know I have a meeting tonight and I worked in the morning, then I'm going to relax for the afternoon. I'm going to let myself rest so that I don't fry myself in the process. Nowadays, there are occasional days where, here's 12 hours of activity all crammed into one day. But I do that in part saying I can do that now, knowing that I'm going to have Friday off. I don't have to do anything then. And so it's still a balance.
And I think it's okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it probably okay just to give, for our viewers to understand, your wife is also pastor, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I am also part of a clergy couple. So
yes.
So the balancing act is I balance and she balances, and we try to coordinate those. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it does not.
Yeah. One of the things, a couple of things I did now in my case, talk about things you do to make sure you rest. Now I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse or a little of both, but as most of you know, James maybe not so much. You guys know that I have medical issues, not so much out the wazoo, but I have a few things that I have to take care of, usually on a daily basis. And so what's nice is those things allow me, I don't know if it's easier, but it's easier to say, okay, I'm gonna block out my time this way, because if I don't, bad things happen. And I'm going to make the time for myself to do things like go to doctor's appointments, utilize technology where I can. The other thing that I know that Heather and I do is Heather and I have always been married. We haven't been married 2 years yet. When we just after we got married, we moved to our current appointments.
Within the first month.
Yes.
Yes.
Do not recommend doing that for the record. Talk about lack of rest. But one of the things that we did very early on in our marriage is we decided, we had decided just for the relationship there will be date night. And when we got to our new churches, we communicated it. Friday night is date night. You can call us, but you call at your own risk. We are not responsible if you knock on the door. We made it very clear, sort of tongue in cheek, and they sort of laughed about it and said, you knocked on the door. We make no promises as to who answers or to what level of items of clothing they have on. Not to be too graphic.
Did not just say that. Oh.
Yeah, well, anyway. But anyway.
I'm sure he was only talking about himself, Heather.
Yes. Just me. Anyway.
He might show up wearing a chicken suit, and you got to be ready for this.
This is true.
I might have a chicken suit, who knows? But the point is that we made intentional things to say, okay, we're going to take time for ourselves and sometimes the hardest part, honestly, for us, at least for me, from my perspective, has been finding time just for ourselves because of COVID and some of the interrelated parts of that. One of the things we were talking about is, honey, you said the other day you can't wait to have your training program in person. I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love you, but I'm sick of looking at you every single day.
Yes.
I need some me time.
Just so everyone's clear, this is normal when you get married. Those of you who are single, James, pay attention. This is a normal thing. There's nothing abnormal about this. In fact, if this doesn't happen, that's usually a warning sign. This is very normal. I think, Jonathan, you're going to weigh in. It's pretty normal.
I'm willing to agree with you on that point. Yes.
Yeah. So, at any rate, it's important to make time for yourself. I try to make time, you know, whether it's to spend time with my wife, spend time for myself, but also, and we do this much the same thing. We have a day off and then a day that's kind of our Sabbath, and we, we sort of do that Friday and Saturday, kind of. It just kind of worked out that way in our schedule. Of course, we're also at two different churches, so it's an interesting sort of dynamic in that point. So what?
Can I?
Oh, go for it, Jack. Yep.
Sorry. I just want to also add all of our conversation so far has been on what to do for a week-to-week basis or in your daily life. And when we look at rest, there's also a time for vacation. And vacation is an exception that gets carved out. And so, like I know Jonathan was talking about being on call, and absolutely, and I agree, except that when I'm on vacation, I give my churches at least a month head notice. I have someone covering that Sunday, but I also have an emergency contact for them. Because sometimes my vacation, you won't be able to reach me. Either I'm choosing to be on vacation and separate, or I've decided to go to a cabin in the middle of nowhere and I actually don't have signal, which happens quite frequently for my vacations. So having that time, noting that vacation is yet another separate rest from your daily or weekly.
And there's a great deal of, that's honestly to the ideal that a vacation should be, because you really should have the option, and this is true for everyone in every line of work. When you go on vacation, you step away completely. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to have a line where someone can call you back for most things. The point is to be away. And really.
So, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Here's an interesting follow-up question to that, though. Realistically, now I, it used to be back in the day, right? Because we're that old apparently. There was a time it's one thing if maybe you take the kids on vacation to Orlando, in the days before cell phones, before smartphones, right? If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, they'd have to know. Well, first of all, they'd have to know where you went. They'd have to know what hotel you were staying, and they would have to know how to find either that number in a phone book or call an operator, right? So, for example, when I was in high school, me and my dad and my sister, we went down to Disney World my senior year for a vacation, right? Well, if somebody wanted to get a hold of us, like my grandma or my aunt, uncle, whoever, in order to get a hold of us, they would have had to. My dad didn't have a cell phone yet. He hadn't gotten his first. He was about to. He would get his. I think about a year or two later, he got his first cell phone for his job. It was through his employer, his police officer. They gave him one of those really old, flip phones. And, if somebody wanted to get a hold of us, they'd have to know that we were staying at Disney, that we were staying at the, I think we stayed at the Polynesian, actually. So they'd have to know where to find us. Well, nowadays, everybody has a cell phone in their pocket. And I do wonder, and not just pastors, but general people, how many people, just, I'll share this freebie. These things do have off switches, right? And I wonder, either because we're addicted to social media or we're addicted to our screens, I wonder if this, well, right, for better and for worse, I wonder, is that in and of itself part of this problem? That because of what we can do on these mobile devices, basically, I wonder if even when we go on vacation, I start to think, I'm thinking about the stereotypical businessman or woman, right? They go on vacation with their husband or their wife or whatever, and their kids, and what are they doing? They're sitting on a lounge chair somewhere on a beach, thumbing through Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. Or then there was the guy in Canada who was in the Bahamas while he posted a video that he was at home for Christmas. Yeah. So what do you guys think about this? I mean, what's been your experiences? 'Cause
My
I wonder,
mind,
yeah.
my mind is drawn in contrast to that, to the stories I heard about my grandfather. And full disclosure for anyone listening who does not know me personally, I am a third generation Methodist pastor. And so when I talk about my grandfather, I'm talking about somebody who graduated from seminary in the 1930s and was active as a Methodist pastor for his entire ministry career there. And for a large part of that, what would happen is that he would take his wife and his two sons, and they would go on vacation. They would take the entire month of August and go up to northern Canada. They had arrangements made for a cabin up in northern Canada. And this was not just in the era before cell phones. This was back in the era when they would go up to northern Canada and they could potentially get in a boat and go down river 5 miles and then walk into town to the general store to use the phone. But also, my grandfather was the kind of person where he saved up for this vacation, and the way my dad describes it is he would go up and do the necessary prep work, fix anything, broken windows on the cabin and clean all the yard waste out that blew in underneath it and all that. So to basically do a day's worth of work right when he got there to set it up. And then he would spend the first week of the 4 weeks that they were up there, where basically he would just get up, eat, and go back to bed for 7 straight days. The priority was to rest and recover and then enjoy himself after that. But that initial, the vacation was a time when you would intentionally cut yourself off from everything else about life. If somebody in his church back home died, he was in a different country, a full day or two journey away, and they couldn't reach him unless he happened to go into town and find out. So the shift in boundaries in the way in between our work and our personal lives that have come in the decades since then, and especially with technology and social media and cell phones, we have lost something of that is the power of vacation, where you literally step out of your life and you do it intentionally, not for the sake of cutting, being disconnected, cut off, but we don't have the ability to do that anymore because we thrive so much on the connections that are ongoing that even when we're trying to rest and relax, we're not willing to walk far enough away from the rest of our life to really tune it out and take care of ourselves. Not the way people used to do.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a really good example. Part of me wonders, can our society learn a lesson from your grandfather?
Only if we do what he did.
Well, what I'm thinking about, like how people, most people, as far as I know, maybe others take longer ones. They'll go on only a 1 week vacation, and sometimes by the time I remember as a kid, we'd go on vacation, and break from school and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden, by the time I'm getting into the groove of actually resting and recuperating, it's time to fly home. Right? And we never really get the rest that we really kind of need. What about James and Heather? What about you guys? We're kind of talking about this idea.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, I'm thinking of the last real vacation that I had, actually before I met you. It was the last time that my sister and I hung out together as single girls. My sister got married about 2 years before I did, and she was engaged, and she was going to get married in about 6 months, and so we had a girls, bachelorette sister week, and we went to the beach, and I remember that my sister looked at me and she's like, why can't you lie still? She's like, just lay down on the towel and get a suntan. It's not that difficult. And I'm like, but I can't just lie here and do nothing. I got to do something. And she was laughing at me. I couldn't relax. I had to get up and dart towards the water and splash around a little bit, and I had to go and play with the family nearby who had kids and help the kid build a sandcastle. I had to go walk the boardwalk, and I was driving my sister crazy. And it's because it takes me almost a full week to wind down from the craziness of life. And then, like you said, about time I'm finally getting some rest. It's time to go back to the crazy world. And I think I'm far from the only one who has that kind of experience. When we are go, 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 go all the time. And it seems like, especially like you said, with our cell phones, we are, God's not the only one who's expected to be omnipresent anymore. It's ridiculous. But I mean, as much as the technology can help, I mean, I like knowing that if I'm away on vacation and somebody does die, I like knowing that happened. I like not coming back to find out that this beloved person in my church died and was buried while I was gone. That would be very crushing. But at the same time, it's hard to just unplug, and it's hard to relax because we are so used to being hyper busy. That's just the first thing that comes into my mind with that.
James, what about you? Just sort of this idea of how do we sort of unplug or not unplug,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I knew that I was going to be overworked this year, especially last semester. So I had actually scheduled in for myself, and I can go into everything I was doing, but I actually scheduled in for myself a week of vacation last semester in the fall and a week of vacation I have coming up after Easter. And both times I'm renting a cabin in the middle of nowhere where I do not get service or signal. So when I went in the fall, I was definitely overworked. I was near a breaking point, per se. I went, I planned out my meals. I hit Kroger's once. I went to the cabin, and the only work I did for the next 6 days was to make my food and to make the fireplace. And while the things I did during there was I slept a lot, I watched movies, I read a book for fun, which I just don't do during seminary. For those who don't know, like any grad school, the amount of reading you have is staggering. So I just can't read for fun after that. And there was a hot tub with the cabin. So I was in that quite a bit. But that was like Hocking Hills. For those in Ohio, fantastic place. Most cabins you will not get service at. So that was my cutoff from everything then. And I have another one scheduled in the spring. I'm also at a point where I'm going through a lot of transitions in life, and recognizing that transitions come with stress and anxiety as well on top of the work. So I scheduled that out knowing what was coming this year. I'm not always as good to myself as that. So, yeah.
Man, hot tub. That's always neat. I haven't
That's think what we know what we're doing on our next vacation. Yep.
We have. We lost Jonathan. Okay, we'll give him a minute. Oh, sorry about that.
Recommendations for you if you want for other places you can go. I don't know what happened to me there, but.
So here's a big long comment from Lisa. Let's try it's made it tough. I'll just put this on the screen. You didn't know I could put your comments on the screen, Lisa, did you? Audience interaction for the win. All right.
Except it cuts off.
I think there's a character limit, so we won't put that against you. Yeah, it is. I think. I think there's. I love the story. You hadn't told me that story, Jonathan. That's a very. I like, man, we should write a treatise or a paper or a book on your grandfather's philosophy of unplugging, because I think we lose that. Like I very often, now I'll even do this if we don't go on vacation. Every now and again, I will call my secretary and say, is there anything going on? And I'll say, my phone will be off for the next 24 hours. If you need me, send me an email. I did it when I turned my phone back on. Right? Just 24 hours, I'll unplug and not, do anything. And that's, I think sometimes we in our culture right now, we panic if our battery gets down to, 50%, right? We forget that these things have off switches. And there's something to be said for an off switch. So let's transition to sort of a little bit. I'm not going to do the Old
If we're
Testament
really
languages.
honest, we kind of have off
we
switches too.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece that's
Yes,
missing.
yes, this is true,
we
right?
really do,
Yeah.
on some level,
Yes,
have off
yeah.
switches that we need to use.
Oh, absolutely. So I'll put this on the screen here. Wait, not remove. What is going? Oh, that's right. I have to do this layout. There we go. So this is Jesus calming the storm out of Mark 4. And what I think this scripture illustrates for us as we're talking about this topic of rest, it's just me talking, is it's not so much the fact that it's not just that Jesus is taking a nap. It's where he's taking a nap. That day when evening came, so they were crossing I think they were crossing the Sea of Galilee, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
Forget which lake it is. Yeah. And his disciples said, let us go over. He said to his disciples, we're going to go over to the other side. So they left the crowd. They left the crowd behind, first of all. So they went to unplug. They took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up. The waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. So I want you to imagine for a minute, just by way of illustration here, I want everybody in our audience to imagine, think of a freak thunderstorm or a freak storm in general. This would have been very common, just the way weather works in this part of the world where there are. It still happens even today to a certain degree. And all of a sudden, there's a sudden squall. And remember, you're not in one of these fancy modern boats. You're not in a fancy speedboat or a fancy yacht that's designed to take a beating out on the ocean. You're in a wooden, hand-built fishing boat. And there's a sudden storm, and you look to and you realize that your leader, your captain, is in the stern of the boat, in the back of the boat, or the front of the boat, I guess it would be. There's a stern. He is sleeping on a cushion. And they go to him and they say, the disciples went to him and said, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? And then, of course, Jesus gets up and he rebukes the waves. But here's Jesus, in our shirt, our hoodies say, Heather's does too. You just can't see it. Jesus should have to be like Jesus. And Jesus, now obviously Jesus is God. Let's not kid ourselves and let's not try to pretend that we're God. But what does it say?
The one that says you should take a nap on a boat?
No. Jesus just says Jesus should naps be like Jesus. But what does it say about, Jesus says you want to follow me, right? And he's asleep in the middle of a storm. Now, obviously, we're not God. We're not Jesus. No one's saying that. But how do we find rest? Because I think this was always a problem prior to a year ago. I think this was always an issue in our culture, obviously. But I think COVID has sort of put a magnifying glass on some of this because, well, now we don't just have, it's one thing to sleep when there's everything's floating around, you're good. But now we have to take time to find rest when there's a storm and what is essentially a hurricane that, and it's not like you can go hide from this. It's not like you live in Florida and you can just go to your relative's house in Tennessee for a couple of days, board up your house and leave. Because there is nowhere on earth except for maybe a remote tropical island that you are safe from this. And so anybody just sort of jump in wants to speak to that. That would be an interesting conversation to have.
So I'd like to jump in a little bit. And sorry, did Sean freeze? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So
no, he just took a drink.
That's fair too. So when I hear this passage, I was actually discussing this with a colleague / debating it with a colleague on an interpretation here. And at the end, A, I immensely respect this colleague. B, at the end of the day, I don't know who actually had the correct interpretation, so I want to give them both, and you can decide. But the tone of this question actually matters a lot. So when the disciples asked Jesus, "Don't you care we drown?" one of us was interpreting as the storm is coming in, the boat's about to get capsized. Jesus, don't you care if we drown, if we all die, if it comes to an end now? Don't you care that the storm is here? How can you sleep through the storm? The other interpretation was, we're your disciples, Jesus. We're your favorites. We're the ones that you look after. Don't you care if we drown? Get up and save us, Jesus. And the way the disciples are, the way you understand the disciples throughout the Gospels and in Mark 4, it could be either one, really. So I'm going to leave that up to interpretation. But there's a part where we are drowning at times within society's anxiety, within the swirl of the pandemic and everything. And sometimes we cry out, Lord, don't you care that the world seems to be falling apart, that the world seems to be drowning in this anxiety and fear. And sometimes we cry out in a very needed, and I'm going to say selfish, but it's not a negative connotation here, but in a very self way of, Lord, don't you care that I'm suffering as well? And I think both we have at times, and you shouldn't be ashamed for having both at times. It's just recognizing that as humans, we have both of those responses at times.
My reaction as I was listening to you talk is, if somebody says to me, Pastor, what's the correct interpretation? My answer is yes. Mm-hmm. I would argue that the first thing that went through my head as I was listening here to you is I'm sitting there going, I think they're probably both right on some level, especially given what we know about the disciples and some of the other things. So other comments, suggestions about kind of this idea of, how do we find rest when there's a hurricane, really a superstorm all around us?
There's a quote that came to mind when I first got the invitation to be part of this group, and we were talking about rest, and it was actually a comment. I want to say it's Diana Butler Bass is the author who has several different books, and one of them is very much about the role of taking Sabbath. And the way she describes it is that Sabbath is necessary for a lot of reasons, but one of them is to regularly remind ourselves that God can handle things without us. One day a week, God can handle this without you. The disciples, in crying out, whichever of those interpretations is the correct one, they were at a point of looking around, and basically they were at the panic point of, we can't handle this. And they were looking at Jesus, and we know as we read through the story, Jesus was able to rest because he had that sense of, I can handle this when I get up to do it. They were overrun with the anxiety of, we can't do this. And the answer to it was basically God saying, you're right, you can't. Get out of my way. Let me handle this for you. And modeling that as, I am resting, and when I get up, I will take care of it. I will handle it. And so it's that same idea of getting our own indispensability out of our system. Whether we are in the middle of a crisis where we have to keep reacting, responding, but that important step of, again, having the ability to say at a certain point, I'm going to step out of this. And I have to do that trusting that God can handle it. And in a lot of cases, we are reluctant to step out of it because we find ourselves like the disciples, caught in the middle of it. I can't figure out how to set it down. I can't figure out how to let go of it, to allow myself to rest. And here I see you who do understand that balance. You're resting, and it feels weird. It feels wrong that you're resting when I can't figure out how.
It's somewhat similar to Mary and Martha in a way. One says, I'm going to spend time with Jesus, while the other one's busy, right? And what at the end of the day,
I'll put that in the category of that is again
I like
one
your cat.
interpretation.
Yes, yeah. Oh no, but like I'm thinking about how a lot of this comes down to priority. If we're being upfront, and did the kitten have a name? By the way, I have to ask. He was on string.
Yes,
I
yes,
have
he
to. The
does.
Street Actors Guild requires that I credit him.
So before I tell you his name, I attended the College of Worcester as my undergrad. The College of Worcester has a tartan. Do you know whose tartan that is?
McLeod.
I should.
I'm going to answer that for him.
Yeah, it's
Is
McLeod.
it really?
And
Yes.
so my cat's name is McLeod because he resembles when I got him as a kitty, he was a bit more yellow. So yes, my cat's name is McLeod.
Sean, how did you not know that the College of Worcester is the McLeod tartan?
I went to the Actor U. We're kangaroos. Okay. I don't know what I did not know that they're. Wow, I feel smart. Okay.
Is it spelled correctly, though?
And
is it spelled correctly?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Yes. And if you need to know, I only have one.
That's good. That's.
Mm-hmm.
There can be only one. Anyway,
man, this is good. Okay,
I too have only one cat, and he has an Irish name, but it's not different entirely.
Anyway,
we were talking about A Storm at Sea.
We were. That honey save. I'm sorry, I asked. Yeah.
I don't know if I can save my husband. I was distracted by the cute cat. Anyway, who apparently has an awesome name. What were we talking
about? Taking naps on boats.
Yeah.
Naps on boats.
Yes, taking naps on boats. Yes.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll jump in with something.
Yes, go ahead while I find my thoughts again.
So this is a slightly off-side thing, but also while Jonathan was talking, it wasn't what you were getting at, but it made me think of this. When we look at, sometimes we can't figure out how to get the rest in we need, how to recover, how to rejuvenate ourselves. There are a lot of things in our society that masquerade as recovery or masquerade as help that people fall back on. So instead of getting the sleep we need or taking that prayer life or doing our spiritual renewal, we drink a fifth of rum a night and we call it good because we feel okay. Or instead of going on that vacation that we should really have, we take some special brownies and we call it good. Or we're not getting as much rest as we need. We're working 2 or 3 jobs. You need that more energy. And so you do some of the harder drugs that give you energy. All these things are the unhealthy way to handle it, are the not good way to handle it. And it's just worth mentioning as we look at rest, there are a lot of things that people try and use to fill in for that end up making it worse, that are half the time because we're feeling anxiety, because we're feeling overworked, overdriven, and because we're not taking the proper time to take care of ourselves, we fall back on the cheap and false fill-ins for those.
And I feel the need to add to that list because we started with a joke about it at the beginning. You talked about the joke of Jonah without his coffee.
Yeah.
Caffeine is one of those things that we lean on sometimes to an unhealthy degree in order to function.
Yes.
I wouldn't know what you're talking about. No, just kidding. I'm definitely addicted to coffee. I'm addicted to coffee. It's horrible.
We'll just start a support group, honey. Hello, my name is Heather, and I'm a coffee addict. We'll start Coffee Holics. Start Coffee Holics Anonymous right here, right now. We'll go with that. So we're kind of probably time to wrap this up. We try to only really go about an hour, but speaking of rest, let's make sure we all get our rest tonight. I don't know what you all have for your day and your tomorrow and the week to come. Any other closing thoughts, words of wisdom regarding rest that you want to leave our audience with tonight? besides take a nap.
The one thing that pops to my mind is it was a Facebook meme about, I think, 3 months ago, and just this simple statement, because we're talking about, the importance of rest, and there are people who try to pretend that they don't need it. And the statement was, just because you carry it well doesn't mean it's not heavy. We are all carrying very heavy things right now. Some of us can handle it better than others. But the fact that you can handle it doesn't mean it's not heavy. It just means that you happen to have figured out how. You still need rest to keep doing it.
And it means that unless you are in a profession, and even if you are in that profession where you've conditioned yourself to handle the weight of these things, everybody has a breaking point. Everybody has a limit. And, this is kind of the reason I wanted to talk about this tonight, because all I have to do is turn on Facebook for 5 minutes, and you can begin to see just people breaking with all kinds of comments and posts and just weird things you never in a million years you thought would see. Heather and James, any other final comments tonight for the audience?
I would add that I recognize that it's really hard for some people to find that rest. Some people in America have to work 2-3 jobs in order to just get by, in order to pay bills and stuff. Some people with larger families are having to work 2 jobs and have a family, struggle to find that time of rest. Rest is something that you will need. It will make you better. But there are people who can talk you through stuff. So whether that be social worker, psychologist, pastor, even somebody who's a coworker with you who has found a way to balance it out somehow, or another parent who has found a way to balance it out slightly. There are people to talk to about that. But I also recognize that it's easier for some than others.
Nope, good advice. Well, thank you all for coming. We do the show live every Monday at 7 p.m. And I know, James, you and we've just give you a little preview of what will be. I don't know if we'll do it I think we're hoping next week. James actually wrote a little outline for a show. We're going to talk about J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. So,
well, I think I know somebody. I think I know a friend of ours who's going to want to be on that talk.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And, new panelist.
Yes. Oh, yes. All right. So, let's pray.
Are they a Methodist pastor in Ohio as well?
No.
Actually, a layperson in a Methodist church in New York, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought of a Methodist pastor in Ohio who might be, but that's fine.
Well,
and let's
more
just
merrier.
put out for people who are watching this. If you, particularly if you're in Ohio, if you're a Methodist pastor, East Ohio Conference, message myself, Pastor Heather. We'll be glad to chat with you, maybe have you on the program. We're always looking for new panelists, new guests. We don't mind having the same people every week too. That's always fun. Jonathan, it was good that you were able to join us tonight.
And full disclosure,
yes,
I had meetings all day. Otherwise, Monday is my usual Sabbath day, and my answer to you would have been, "I'm sorry, I'm resting today."
No,
I had to shuffle my schedule this week.
Well, anyway, I do this. I do this sort of as kind of work, but also I get some enjoyment out of it, so that's why I don't mind doing it so much. And there will be weeks where we don't do the show, just because of Sabbath and taking a break off. Probably when we got a camp meeting here in a couple of months, just we're crossing our fingers that'll happen. I probably will not do the show that week. Let's pray. Lord, may you give us Sabbath holy rest for our bodies and our emotions and our brains. Many of us are worn out. Help us to remember that you can deal with these things. that we can take a moment to rest. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, we'll see everybody next time. See you next week, Monday at 7 on Facebook and YouTube. Have a good evening. Say bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Oh,
Sorry,
Thanks,
had to.
Heather. Bye.
right, don't leave. I'm going to kill the stream and then we'll